Good evening. Welcome to tonight's scary bedtime story to help you fall asleep. Please comment below and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. Yard sales have always served as a form of therapy for me. There's something inherently satisfying about sifting through forgotten belongings, discovering that singular hidden gem, and contemplating the narrative behind it. These weekend excursions provide welcome respite from my demanding career, opportunities to decompress, and perhaps unearth treasures for my dwelling. One crisp Saturday morning, I poured fresh coffee into my travel mug, climbed into my hatchback, and ventured toward Willow Creek, a nearby subdivision hosting their annual community-wide rummage event. The thoroughfares bustled with treasure hunters, navigating between properties where tables sagged beneath mountains of discarded possessions, ranging from dusty literary collections to retro decorative trinkets. I parked near a secluded cul-de-sac where a solitary sale was arranged beneath a sprawling maple tree. The handwritten placard caught my attention immediately. Heirloom collectibles and vintage finds. I strolled over, leisurely examining the curated assortment of merchandise. The collection impressed me. Antique cameras, ornate silverware collections, even a classic Underwood typewriter. But what truly captivated me was a magnificent full-length mirror leaning against the residence's exterior wall. Its frame featured intricate gold leaf embellishment, delicately carved with intertwining botanical patterns. Despite noticeable age, the glass possessed that enchanting vintage distortion that lent it undeniable character. I envisioned it positioned in my entryway, capturing afternoon sunlight streaming through nearby windows. As I admired the craftsmanship, the proprietor approached, a slender gentleman perhaps in his late 50s, with distinguished salt and pepper hair and penetrating azure eyes. "Admiring the looking glass?" he inquired, his voice measured but containing an undercurrent I couldn't immediately identify. "It's exquisite," I replied, running my fingertips along the ornate framework. "Your asking price?" He hesitated momentarily, resting his hand protectively upon the mirror's edge. "It's quite exceptional. Been within my lineage for generations. Are you absolutely certain it suits your needs?" His reluctance surprised me. Most sellers I'd encountered eagerly promoted their merchandise, yet he seemed almost possessive of the piece. "I'm confident," I responded with a reassuring smile. "It would complement my entryway perfectly." He studied me intently before exhaling resignedly. "Very well, but it's substantial. Allow me to deliver it to your residence. No inconvenience whatsoever." His insistence triggered mild apprehension. The mirror would have easily fit within my vehicle, but refusing seemed impolite. Against my better judgment, I acquiesced and provided my address. Several hours later, his weathered pickup truck arrived at my residence. I greeted him outside, intending to assist with transportation, but he dismissed my offer with a wave. "I'll manage," he insisted, carefully extracting the mirror and carrying it inside. He positioned it against my living room wall and stepped back, seemingly appreciating his handiwork. "It belongs here," he remarked, his tone almost reverential. "Treasure it properly." "Thank you," I replied, but he lingered disconcertingly, his gaze scanning my living space as though cataloging every particular. His presence felt increasingly invasive, as if memorizing my home's layout. Eventually, he departed, and I secured the door behind him, experiencing unexpected relief at his absence. That evening, I relaxed on my sofa, admiring the mirror in its new environment. The gilded frame captured lamplight magnificently, exactly as I'd envisioned. But as nightfall deepened, subtle disquiet crept through me. I dismissed it as merely overactive imagination and retired for the evening. The following morning, while retrieving mail from my porch, I noticed an unfamiliar vehicle across the street, an aged azure sedan with heavily tinted windows. Initially dismissive, my concern grew when the vehicle remained stationary throughout the afternoon. Peering through my curtains, I couldn't identify the occupant through the darkened glass. Shrugging off my unease, I returned indoors. That evening, while drawing curtains, I glanced outside again. The sedan maintained its position, but this time I discerned a silhouette behind the steering wheel. My chest constricted when I recognized the yard sale vendor. Why would he park outside my residence? Perhaps he lived nearby? Perhaps he was visiting someone? Yet, as days progressed, the sedan maintained its vigilant presence, always positioned in identical location for extended periods. By the fourth day, I could no longer disregard the situation. That evening, while preparing dinner, I glanced through my kitchen window and discovered the sedan parked closer, directly against the curb before my house. The man sat motionless behind the wheel, staring fixedly at my residence. Determination overrode apprehension. I strode purposefully onto my front porch, heart hammering against my ribcage as I crossed the lawn. The moment I reached the sidewalk, he activated the ignition and accelerated away. I remained frozen momentarily, hands trembling. Was I overreacting? Perhaps he had legitimate reasons for his presence. That night, sleep proved elusive. Every subtle household noise startled me, and the mirror, once an elegant addition to my decor, now emanated discomfort. I relocated it to the garage, draping it with an ancient bedsheet. The following evening, while seated in my darkened living room, headlights suddenly flooded the front garden. Peering cautiously through curtains, I witnessed the azure sedan parked in my driveway. Panic surged as I observed the man exit his vehicle and approach my entrance. I frantically retrieved my phone and contacted emergency services, whispering my predicament to the dispatcher while securing doors and windows. The man paced methodically along my sidewalk, occasionally gazing upward toward windows. Though he didn't attempt entry, his presence chilled me profoundly. Within minutes, sirens pierced the night. The man immediately returned to his vehicle and sped away, vanishing into darkness. When authorities arrived, I described him comprehensively, provided the vehicle's registration information, and detailed the entire situation. Officers assured me they would patrol the area frequently and attempt to locate him. The man never returned, yet paranoia lingered. I obsessively verified locks and constantly surveyed my surroundings. Eventually, I returned the mirror to my living room, hoping daylight might restore normalcy. But even now, it doesn't feel authentically mine. Something about its presence feels burdensome, as though ownership truly remains with him. I haven't decided whether to retain or sell it, but currently it remains. A silent reminder of how easily seemingly innocuous possessions can cast enduring shadows. To this day, I remain uncertain about his motives. Was he merely an eccentric individual fixated on me? Or did darker intentions drive his behavior? All I comprehend with certainty is that I've abandoned yard sale excursions, and whenever a vehicle lingers excessively near my residence, dread washes over me. Sometimes the possessions we introduce into our lives arrive accompanied by unexpected baggage. I'm a 34-year-old claims adjuster at Meridian Insurance. After endless weeks of processing paperwork and fielding client calls, I find solace in browsing through other people's discarded treasures. There's something magical about discovering items that whisper their own histories, forgotten pieces waiting for resurrection. Last month, on a crisp autumn morning, I was cruising through Oak Ridge Estates when a hand-painted yard sale sign caught my eye. It was one of those impulsive detours, the kind where expectations are minimal, yet something compels you to stop anyway. The property was unassuming, just a weathered bungalow with collapsible tables arranged across the driveway. Assorted merchandise lay scattered about, dog-eared novels, kitchen contraptions, and an array of tools that immediately captured my attention. Among the hardware collection stood a vintage cobalt blue metal toolbox. The sight instantly transported me to my grandmother's workshop, where she'd tinker with projects during my childhood visits. I could almost inhale the lingering sense of machinery oil and cedar shavings just gazing at it. I unlatched the lid to discover an assortment of miscellaneous implements inside, several wrenches, assorted screwdrivers, and a well-worn mallet with a honey-colored wooden grip. Nothing exceptional, but the nostalgic value was immeasurable. "How much for this?" I inquired, hefting the toolbox toward the sale organizer. A silver-haired gentleman perhaps in his late 60s with sun-weathered features and a tranquil demeanor. $20, he replied with a dismissive shrug, as if the price were inconsequential. "Deal," I responded, reaching for my wallet. We exchanged pleasantries about craftsmanship and how contemporary tools lacked the durability of vintage implements. Then I carried my acquisition to the car and departed, pleased with my serendipitous find. A week passed, and the toolbox had nearly slipped from mind. It rested in my garage, awaiting restoration before I'd incorporate it into my DIY organization system. One evening as I finished dinner, the doorbell chimed unexpectedly. I wasn't anticipating visitors, so I quickly dried my hands and approached the entrance. Standing on my doorstep was a stranger, approximately 50 years old with a gaunt physique, cropped chestnut hair, and features that suggested a difficult life. While not overtly threatening, his presence radiated an unsettling intensity. "Can I help you?" I asked, maintaining the door partially closed. "Yeah," he responded, his voice gravelly and abrasive. "You purchased a toolbox at an estate sale last weekend, correct?" I stared momentarily, bewildered. Yes. Why?" "It's mine," he declared, leaning uncomfortably closer. "It was sold mistakenly. I need it returned immediately." Something felt profoundly wrong. The gentleman conducting the sale never indicated the toolbox belonged to someone else. Even if there had been a misunderstanding, I'd made a legitimate purchase. Nevertheless, I attempted diplomacy. "I apologize, but I bought it properly from the homeowner. Are you certain it's the same toolbox?" "It's definitely mine," he insisted. "Look, I'm not seeking trouble. I simply need my toolbox back." I hesitated, sensing hidden motivations behind his request. "I'm sorry," I reiterated more firmly. "I purchased it legally. If there's a dispute, perhaps you should discuss it with the seller." He regarded me with penetrating intensity before nodding curtly. "Very well," he said, turning to leave. "But I'll return." True to his promise, he reappeared 2 days later. I was watching a documentary when the doorbell echoed through the house. This time, I approached cautiously, peeking through the peephole to see him standing there, noticeably more agitated than before. "Hey!" he shouted, pounding forcefully. "I know you're inside. Just surrender the toolbox, and I'll disappear forever." I remained silent, increasingly disturbed by his aggressive demeanor. This wasn't merely someone attempting to reclaim property. Something darker seemed at play. After several minutes, he departed, but not before pacing anxiously across my porch like a caged predator. His visitations persisted over subsequent days, each confrontation more intense than the last. He'd appear at unpredictable hours, dawn, dusk, hammering on the door and ranting about the toolbox. Once I heard the doorknob rattle and realized with horror that I'd forgotten to engage the deadbolt. I hastily secured it and phoned my colleague. "This guy's completely unhinged," my friend warned. "You need to contact authorities." I hesitated, concerned about escalation since technically he hadn't committed any criminal offense. But when he returned a week later attempting to force entry, I knew intervention was necessary. It was approaching midnight, around 11:30 p.m., and I was in the kitchen tidying up when I heard violent pounding against the door. This wasn't just knocking. It was the unmistakable sound of someone attempting to breach the entrance. "Open this door!" he bellowed. "I know you're inside!" Heart racing, I grabbed my phone and dialed emergency services. As I awaited connection, I clutched a kitchen knife, my hands trembling uncontrollably. "I'm calling the police!" I shouted through the door. "You need to leave immediately!" Momentary silence followed. Then I heard him mutter unintelligibly before retreating. I maintained contact with the dispatcher until officers arrived, explaining the entire sequence of events. "Are you familiar with this individual?" the responding officer inquired. "No," I replied. "He's been harassing me about a toolbox I purchased at a yard sale." The officer nodded. "We'll document everything and increase patrols in your area. If he returns, contact us without hesitation." That night, sleep eluded me as I contemplated the toolbox's significance. What made it so valuable? Was it sentimental, or did it conceal something? I ventured into the garage and examined it thoroughly, inspecting each tool individually. Nothing appeared remarkable, just ordinary wrenches and screwdrivers I'd observed initially. But then I noticed something peculiar. The toolbox floor seemed unusually elevated. I probed the surface with a screwdriver and discovered a concealed compartment beneath a false bottom. My breath caught as I revealed what lay hidden underneath. Several small plastic packets filled with crystalline white powder were nestled inside. My stomach churned with the horrifying realization. Drugs. The man wasn't pursuing the toolbox. He was desperate to retrieve his narcotics stash. The following morning, I transported the toolbox directly to the police station and provided a comprehensive statement. The officer I spoke with appeared unsurprised, nodding grimly as he documented my account. "You've done exactly right," he assured me. "We'll investigate thoroughly, but I recommend heightened vigilance for the coming weeks. If this individual knows you've discovered his supply, he may not abandon his pursuit easily." After leaving the station, I attempted to resume normal activities. Work, errands, routine tasks. Life had to continue despite the disruption. It was late evening when I returned home. My thoughts remained fixated on recent events. The officer's warning resonated clearly. The man might persist. The authorities promised to investigate, but their parting advice lingered ominously. "Exercise caution." As I pulled into my driveway, immediate wrongness permeated the atmosphere. The porch light, which I habitually left illuminated, was extinguished, leaving my home's entrance shrouded in disquieting darkness. I retrieved my phone from the passenger seat and exited the vehicle, surveying my surroundings warily. Then I saw it. The front door stood wide open, the locking mechanism splintered and dangling uselessly from the frame. Adrenaline surged through my system as I froze, staring at the gaping entrance. I debated contacting emergency services again, but felt compelled to assess the damage to my sanctuary. I dialed 911, keeping the operator connected while cautiously approaching the house. The interior was catastrophic. The living room resembled the aftermath of a cyclone. Cushions torn from furniture, shelves emptied, documents scattered everywhere. My heart pounded deafeningly as I ventured deeper inside. The kitchen appeared equally devastated. Cabinet doors ajar, dishes shattered across the floor, even refrigerator contents dumped unceremoniously onto countertops. As I turned toward the bedroom corridor, I detected the unmistakable sound of hurried footsteps. My pulse accelerated as I pressed myself against the wall, straining to listen. The rear door slammed, and I glimpsed two figures sprinting across the backyard, disappearing into the shadows beyond my property line. I wanted to pursue them, to confront them, but fear rooted me in place. Instead, I waited momentarily, confirming their departure before continuing to survey the destruction. My bedroom was utterly ransacked. Closets emptied, mattress overturned, every drawer extracted from the dresser and upended onto the floor. No investigative expertise was required to determine their objective, the toolbox. It now resided safely in police evidence storage, but these individuals remained oblivious to that fact. They had monitored my movements, waiting for my absence to invade my home and retrieve their contraband. The realization sent chills cascading down my spine. These weren't opportunistic thieves, but desperate individuals willing to violate my sanctuary and risk apprehension to recover their narcotics. More disturbing still, they now realized their prize was missing. Law enforcement arrived shortly thereafter. I described the incident, providing whatever details I could about the intruders, though darkness had obscured their features. Officers documented everything, inspected the premises, and assured me of increased patrols. "Do you believe they'll return?" I asked, my voice quavering despite efforts to maintain composure. "Possibly," one officer admitted candidly. "But now that they've confirmed the toolbox isn't here, they may abandon the pursuit. Nevertheless, we'll maintain surveillance. Consider installing superior locks and security systems." The subsequent days were spent replacing locks, implementing security measures, and temporarily relocating to a friend's residence while processing everything. The violation was overwhelming. My sanctuary, my safe haven, had been invaded, and I struggled to shake the persistent feeling of being watched. Even now, I scrutinize my surroundings constantly when arriving home, searching for unfamiliar vehicles or suspicious figures lurking nearby. Law enforcement hasn't provided investigation updates, and I remain uncertain whether they apprehended the yard sale visitor or his accomplices. Thankfully, the man never reappeared. Perhaps authorities captured him, or maybe he determined the risk outweighed potential reward. Regardless, I exist in perpetual vigilance, constantly examining my environment. In retrospect, I recognize my naivety in believing yard sales were innocent diversions. What began as a nostalgic purchase transformed into one of life's most harrowing experiences. I've always harbored an affection for antique furnishings. The patina of age, those distinctive imperfections, they weave narratives that contemporary pieces simply cannot match. The moment my gaze fell upon that weathered mahogany rocking chair at the neighborhood estate sale, I recognized it as irreplaceable. It possessed an understated elegance only heritage furniture achieves. The richly burnished wood embellished with intricate engravings of serpentine vines and delicate foliage. Though the cushioned seat bore several abrasions, the framework appeared remarkably sound. I could already envision it nestled in my parlor, perfectly positioned beneath the bay window. "What's your asking price for this rocking chair?" I inquired, tracing my fingertips along the smoothly contoured armrest. The woman overseeing the sale barely acknowledged me, muttering dismissively, $35. The value seemed astonishingly modest, but something in her tone gave me pause. She appeared unusually eager to relinquish the piece. "It's genuinely antique, correct?" I pressed, curious about its provenance. "It's ancient," she responded with visible indifference. "Are you interested, or shall I offer it elsewhere?" Her detached attitude should have triggered caution, but I attributed it to simple desire for inventory reduction. I presented payment, transferred the chair to my vehicle, and departed, enthusiastic about incorporating this acquisition into my home decor. The chair integrated seamlessly into my living space. I devoted that afternoon to rearranging furniture around this new centerpiece, draping a hand-woven throw across its back and positioning a small oriental rug beneath it. By completion, the arrangement suggested the chair had eternally belonged there. That evening, I settled into its embrace for the first time, balancing a novel and steaming chamomile tea. The timber creaked gently beneath my weight, the rhythmic swaying motion providing unexpected tranquility. Around 11 o'clock, I extinguished lamps and retired to bed. As I reclined in darkness, I detected it, a faint creaking emanation from the living area. The sound maintained perfect rhythm, like someone gently rocking back and forth in the chair. I elevated myself, listening attentively. The noise persisted momentarily before ceasing. Simply the wood acclimating to new surroundings, I reassured myself, though my heartbeat accelerated. I rotated away from the door and attempted sleep, but the auditory memory lingered disturbingly. The mysterious creaking became a nightly occurrence, sometimes barely perceptible, other instances more pronounced, as if someone were applying substantial force to the curved runners. I began avoiding my living room after twilight, preferring confinement to my bedroom beyond locked doors. One morning, I entered the living area and halted abruptly. The chair had shifted position, now angled toward the window rather than parallel with it. Perhaps I nudged it inadvertently, but I knew this rationalization was flawed. I'd meticulously avoided touching it while vacuuming the previous afternoon, and I lived alone. No one else could have repositioned it. I forcefully returned the chair to its designated location and continued my routine, struggling to dismiss mounting unease. One evening, determined to debunk these disturbances, I conducted an experiment. After dinner, I occupied the chair briefly, gently rocking while attempting to identify any mechanical idiosyncrasy, explaining the autonomous movement or sound. Nothing appeared abnormal. Before retiring, I retrieved a small adhesive strip and positioned it discreetly beneath one of the chair's runners, marking its precise placement. If movement occurred again, I'd possess irrefutable evidence. I awakened around 2 o'clock a.m. to the most thunderous creaking yet. Violent creaking, wood straining as the chair oscillated ferociously back and forth. I donned my robe and rushed into the living area. The chair was rocking violently, the decorative throw blanket slipping from its position onto the floor. "Stop!" I commanded, though uncertain whom or what I addressed. The chair ceased movement abruptly, the room descending into unsettling silence. My gaze immediately located the adhesive marker. The chair had migrated several inches from its original position. That constituted the first instance I experienced genuine terror. I illuminated every light that night and maintained vigilance from the sofa, observing the chair until daybreak. The subsequent evening, while securing locks, I detected a new phenomenon. Faint whispering, barely audible yet unmistakable, emanating from the living area. I cautiously approached the threshold, heart palpitating. The whispers intensified, though I couldn't decipher specific language. The sound appeared to originate directly from the rocking chair. "Who's there?" I called. The whispering ceased abruptly. I backed away, secured my phone, and contacted my friend Lillian. "I need you to visit immediately," I said, struggling to maintain composure. Lillian arrived 20 minutes later, eyebrows raised skeptically when I described the chair's peculiar behavior. "You're experiencing auditory hallucinations," she declared, settling comfortably on my sofa. But then the creaking commenced again. Lillian froze, eyes widening as she stared at the chair. "All right," she whispered. "That's decidedly abnormal." The ultimate catalyst arrived 2 nights later. I'd resolved to sleep in the living room, believing my presence might deter whatever supernatural activity plagued the chair. Around 3:00 a.m., I awakened to a thunderous crash. The chair was rocking with unprecedented violence, repeatedly slamming against the wall with each backward motion. The throw blanket had tumbled to the floor. I scrambled upright, retreating against the opposite wall. "Stop this immediately!" I shouted, though uncertain whom I addressed. The chair continued its frenzied movement, wood groaning under impossible strain. I grabbed my keys and fled the house, spending remainder of night in my vehicle. The following morning, I dragged the chair unceremoniously to the curb, attaching a hastily scrawled sign reading simply, "Free." I cared nothing for who claimed it. I merely wanted it gone from my life. By evening's approach, the chair had vanished, but my relief proved premature. The living room felt strangely vacant, yet not comfortingly so. For weeks afterward, I couldn't dismiss the sensation that I'd introduced something malevolent into my sanctuary with that chair. Now, whenever I encounter vintage furniture pieces, I hesitate instinctively. Despite appreciating their aesthetic appeal, I recognize the impossible-to-determine histories they harbor. As enchanting as that rocking chair appeared initially, I've learned one undeniable truth. Some treasures extract too steep a price for possession. When you're immersed in the tech industry like I am, people naturally assume your home resembles a showcase of cutting-edge gadgetry and state-of-the-art systems. The truth couldn't be more contradictory. While my professional hours revolve around sophisticated networks, my personal sanctuary celebrates analog nostalgia, vintage gaming consoles, crackling vinyl records, and yes, VHS tapes. There's something profoundly meditative about rewinding a cassette, that gentle mechanical whir transporting me to childhood afternoons, a tangible ritual that modern streaming services can never replicate. So when I discovered a cardboard box of VHS tapes priced at just $5 during a neighborhood rummage sale, it felt like uncovering buried treasure. The sale itself was unremarkable. Several doors down from my residence, a family preparing to relocate had arranged mismatched possessions across their front lawn. The homeowner reclined in a weathered lawn chair, sipping lemonade from a perspiring glass, looking eager to dispense with unwanted belongings. I hadn't arrived seeking anything particular, but the collection of videocassettes immediately beckoned. Most were beloved classics, Close Encounters, The Lost Boys, Raiders of the Lost Ark, nostalgic cinematic gems. But nestled beneath these familiar titles lay something curious. An unmarked ebony cassette, its identifying label peeled away, leaving only a ghostly adhesive residue. Its mysterious presence among the recognizable films intrigued me. I placed the entire box in my trunk, anticipating a weekend of retro entertainment. That evening, after methodically arranging the tapes, I deliberately saved the enigmatic unmarked one for last. The anticipation reminded me of childhood Christmas mornings. What unexpected delight might it contain? Bootlegged concert footage? Forgotten homemade recordings? Something bizarrely entertaining? The possibilities stretched endlessly. I inserted the cassette into my refurbished VCR, settled into my armchair with a craft beer, and awaited the revelation. Static filled the screen momentarily before the recording materialized. The footage appeared grainy, characteristic of amateur recordings captured on bulky camcorders prevalent during the 80s and 90s. The image stabilized, revealing a family, a man, woman, and 2 children, gathered in a comfortable living room. They laughed, conversed, and shared a bowl of popcorn. Initially, the scene seemed unremarkable, merely ordinary domestic moments preserved on magnetic tape. But as I continued watching, something about the setting tugged at my consciousness. The furniture arrangement, the distinctive wallpaper pattern, an unsettling familiarity crept through me. I leaned closer, scrutinizing every detail, and then realization crashed over me like frigid water. The living room depicted wasn't merely familiar, it was mine. My house. My living room. I pressed forward, disbelieving, examining the screen with microscopic intensity. The layout matched precisely. Sofa positioned against the far wall, the antique fireplace with its slightly damaged mantelpiece, the recessed alcove housing my bookshelf. Even the distinctive floral wallpaper pattern unmistakably matched my current residence. But the recording appeared decades old, long before I'd purchased the property. I paused playback, staring at the frozen image, struggling to comprehend. My home's construction dated to the late 80s, and I'd acquired it 5 years prior from an elderly couple who had owned it extensively. Perhaps this footage captured those previous occupants. But that explanation faltered immediately. The people on screen were considerably younger, likely 30s, with elementary school-aged children approximately 8 or 9 years old. I couldn't recall any photographs featuring children during my property viewing. I convinced myself the resemblance must be coincidental, then resumed playback, determined to unravel this peculiarity. As the recording continued, the family's joyful atmosphere dissolved perceptibly. The children glanced anxiously toward the frame's edge, while the parents exchanged tense glances. Initially subtle, their behavioral shift became increasingly evident, micro-expressions revealing mounting apprehension. The father whispered something to the mother, who nodded almost imperceptibly, drawing the children protectively closer. My chest tightened as I observed, fully captivated by the unfolding scene. The camera panned slightly, revealing more of the room. Shadows danced across the distant wall, moving unnaturally, divorced from the people in frame, as if possessing independent existence. One child pointed toward the hallway, the same corridor that now led to my bedroom, and the mother shook her head firmly, embracing him tighter. The recording distorted momentarily, image flickering with static interference, but whispers emerged through the electronic noise. The family appeared terrified, their gazes repeatedly darting toward the hallway entrance, as if anticipating some imminent emergence. The camera jolted violently, as though the operator had dropped it. Static engulfed the screen briefly, and when the picture returned, the angle had shifted downward toward the floor, capturing only the family's feet. The whispers intensified, accompanied by muffled childish sobbing. Then came a heavy thud, like deliberate footsteps, but their source remained off-screen. The recording terminated abruptly, leaving nothing but darkness. I sat motionless, pulse thundering in my ears, processing what I'd witnessed. Rational explanations suggested staged performance or elaborate prank, yet something about their expressions, their terror, seemed too authentic for fabrication. I ejected the cassette and set it aside, promising myself I'd examine it more carefully later, perhaps discovering some overlooked detail that would explain everything. But throughout the night, those frightened faces haunted me, the way they stared toward my hallway, as if something malevolent approached. The following morning, determined to view the recording with daylight's clarity, I studied every nuance, the family's movements, their expressions, visual anomalies. I noticed something previously overlooked, a calendar hanging on the wall. The year displayed predated my residence by nearly 30 years. The family repeatedly focused on the same off-camera location, their expressions reflecting escalating panic. Then, just before the recording terminated, I glimpsed it, a shadow. Tall and angular, it briefly traversed the frame. Unlike ordinary shadows, this appeared like a void, not darkness, but absence of light itself. The family huddled together, mouths moving as if screaming silently, then blackness consumed the screen. I rewound repeatedly, analyzing whether special effects or lighting tricks created the anomaly. But with each viewing, the shadow appeared increasingly substantial, a genuine presence captured on magnetic tape. Unable to dismiss the recording, I approached a neighbor who had resided on my street for decades, inquiring about previous occupants before the elderly couple who sold me the house. The neighbor hesitated visibly, discomfort evident before reluctantly responding. I avoid discussing it. They departed suddenly. Something about the house disturbed them profoundly. When I pressed for elaboration, they shook their head. From my observation, they abandoned most possessions, seemingly in tremendous haste. The property remained vacant approximately 3 years before your predecessors purchased it. My investigation ceased there. The cassette returned to its box, and the box relocated to my attic. I haven't touched it since that day. Occasionally, though, curiosity resurfaces. What genuinely happened to that family? Whatever occurred in this house before my arrival, I desperately hope it remains historical. Yet sometimes, when silence permeates the house late at night, I swear I detect faint whispers, identical to those captured on the tape, and my gaze inevitably drifts toward that hallway, wondering what might emerge from its shadows.